those of you who are coming back, welcome back. Anyone who hasn't been here yet, welcome aboard. Last week we ended up with, well, we didn't really end last week. We sort of segued last week after discussing the different parts of the life cycle. And we split them up into three, which are four, and we described it as the human being a roots and lekabel. Okay, you can translate it as needy, full of desire, or just roots and lekabel. All right, this is not for everybody. This is for those of you who this talks to. This is the language of relationships. This is the language of personal growth, using the language of Torah. And I'm going to do something today that I really hadn't planned on doing at this stage. And yet, for those of you who are coming for that, I'd like to offer you something a little interesting as we slide into Rosh Hashanah. And that is to take Torah's roots and lekabel to the next level, which is Torah's משפיע ומקבל. And that really takes us back to Brias Olam and the first parsha in the Torah. So sit back, enjoy the ride. It won't take long, but by the time we're done today, we will have discussed some of the core understandings into ourselves and the relationships between ourselves and others, and we may even touch upon our relationship to Torah, and maybe by the time we're done with the Eibishter. Okay? So, we're going to start with, and this is very specific, okay? This is not just as we flow. This is very specific from point A to point B as we work our way up to the understanding of the interactions between everything in the Bria. So we start with a Gemara. Well, actually, truth is we start with a pusik, right? Which the Gemara is going to quote. And whenever we say a pusik, so we got to look inside to see the pusik. So the pusik says as follows: "Vayivru lekim es hudam b'tzalmoi, b'tzelem lekim buru oisoy, zucher nekayva buru oisam." Now again, I'm not going to go giving a share in psikim. That's not what we're here for. We're here to understand how to interact the best way possible. What we're going to use is certain Torah perspectives in order to launch to the next step, which is, what do I need to do in order to get what I want to get in the healthiest way possible? Okay? So, many of the Mefarshim on this Pusik mentioned that it's obvious that the Pusik is talking about the fact that there's a Giffen and a Neshama, which is something that we spoke about when we discussed Horse and Rider. For those of you who are following, if not, you can always rewatch a previous class where we talk about Horse and Rider, where the horse and the rider are referenced by the Giffen and the Neshama. And there are many Mefarshim that say that this Pusik alludes to that. That the Zucher Nekaiva Bodam is about the initial Zucher Nekaiva, which is the internal Zucher Nekaiva. Alright? So then we come to a very interesting Gemara. And again, when we quote the Gemara, we're going to look inside. So the Gemara of Babasad of Ayin Daladum and Bais, Or B'hidum Arav, Kol Mashabura HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilomai Zucher Nekaiva Bodam. Now, as we know, all words in Lashon Kodesh have multiple meanings. Just like in our daily language, we have different words that have multiple meanings. So Zucher Nekaiva, of course, is also referring to the real and true Zucher Nekaiva. That's what it says in the Pusik. And yet at the same time, in the interconnectedness of the Bria, where everything is connected according to the Mekabulim especially, that are understanding this Gemara, which is that everything in the Bria connects in a Zucher and a Kaiva connection. So there's a masculine, there's a feminine, there's a male, there's a female, there's a Zucher, there's a Nekaiva, there's a Zachris, there's a Nukva. Regardless of what language you're using to describe it, at the end of the day it boils down to that in every interaction, in order for that interaction to be of value to the point where it has a result, there needs to be a Mashpia and a Makabel. And regardless of what the rest of the world in 2020 is trying to convince us, the last time I checked, you need a Tati and a Mami to have children. And it could be that at some time in the future that will change, but in the last 5,780 years it hasn't, as far as we know. So this is a process, though, that's not only in the physical process of a tatimam. And I would like to use this to launch the concept that what the Gemara is teaching us is that all of the relationships throughout the Bria, in order to have results, need to be a relationship of a Mashpi'a and a Makabel. And again, I'm going to go back to my notes because this is very important. I don't want to miss anything. Okay, so what we're going to do is just to understand that we're going to use a game model. Okay, it doesn't mean that life is a game. We're not suggesting that life is a game. But we're going to use a game model to understand just how this works a little bit. So every game has rules. And we know that even though rules can be broken at times, but you never want to break so many rules so that you just end up giving up the whole game. In the relationship, in the game, so to say, in the dance between the Mashpi'a and the Makabel, there are certain rules which, when they are followed, lead to results that are satisfactory to all. And again, I want to make it clear, the Zucher Nekava Mashpi'a, Zucher Nekaiva Mashpi'a Makabel, male, female, those are all words I'm going to interchange as I'm speaking, as I move forward. I don't always mean, when I say male, I don't mean the man. And when I say female, I don't always mean the woman. When I say male, I mean the Mashpi'a. When I say female, I mean the Makabel. When I say Zucher, I mean the Mashpi'a. When I say Nekaiva, I mean the Makabel. When I say Mashpi'a, I don't mean specifically the man. When I say Makabel, I don't mean specifically the woman. Okay, these are just interchangeable words so that we can understand the interaction the best way possible. If anyone has any questions, by the way, up until here or as I move through, feel free to type them in. We see them on the screen. If everything follows clearly defined rules, then so should relationships. And I would like to suggest the following. And if you need a pen and paper for this, just to keep track, you might want to, but don't take so much time writing that you get distracted from what I'm saying, because I will repeat it enough times, hopefully, for you to be able to remember it and maybe even write it down after. Or we can just install it for future use. All right? So here we go. The rules say as follows. So we've spoken in the past about feeding the need. Human beings are need-driven. We are driven by needs. All right? And the goal at any given time is to feed the need. When we talked about the decision-making process, we talked about needs versus wants, long-term needs versus short-term wants. We talked about the pain-pleasure exchange. We talked about, not the pain-pleasure exchange, I'm sorry, that's something that's going to come up now in Mashpi'a Makabel. We talked about the pain-pleasure decision, part of our choices. We spoke about right and wrong. We spoke about love and fear. Anger or fear, right? And that those are the things that drive our decisions. We spoke about habits. What are your rituals? Depending on what you do on a daily basis, those are the results you're going to get consistently. Right? That's the power of consistency, of repetition. We said that the Malach said he wants to go here, he has to go there, he has so many things to do. The Raglai Melichas Oisig Levaisach Knesses is that the Hergel, it became a Hergel, it became a habit that no matter what he was going to do, what he was thinking of doing, we automatically, so we follow our Hergailim. They become our Hergel, they become our habits. We discussed how to, or whether or not we could change habits or create new habits. We talked about formulas for change, formulas for success. These are all things that we're going to continue to talk about moving forward. For right now, let's understand that it's all about feeding the need. We are need-driven creatures. Right? If you go back and you take a look at Rutz and Lekabel, you'll realize that that's what's driving everything. So whether it's a Rutz and Lekabel for physical pleasure, whether it's a Rutz and Lekabel for control, respect, and attention, whether it's a Rutz and Lekabel for knowledge, those are the basic needs. And whether the person is needing them for no purpose, whether it's in phase one, with a reason, in the Rachnisdika phase, when we're growing up, the teenage years, and we're developing, our Rutz and Lekabel, our ability, our capacity to receive, instead of being takers, which is what phase 1 really is. And as we move into the third phase, where we become contributors, we become mashpiim, to the extent that we can, not givers, right? Because give would mean I have to rip my arm off and hand it to you. That would be giving. My item was saying, Shalaima just gave a kidney to his father. That's called giving. You actually give a part of yourself. That's possibly giving in our existence. Everything else is just hashpua. So if I know something and I share it with you, I'm teaching it to you, whatever that, I'm being mashpia. And in order for that to work, there has to be a makabel. So now, in the relationship between the husband and the wife, between the zucher and the nekayva, between the mashpia and the makabel, there are rules. Yet before we step into the rules, we first have to be able to figure out, what am I? In the set that we call Buy, Sell, Steal, we talk about being able to figure out, when we're watching others and eventually ourselves, in any interaction, am I buying, am I selling, or am I stealing? Right? And we spoke about where the focus has to go. Now we're taking it more personal. So in the relationship between the mashpia and the makabel, between the husband and the wife, and the mashpia and the makabel could be a rebbe and a talmud, it could be parents and children, or it could be a husband and a wife. It could be a boss and his workers. It could be someone who has a service in the service industry. Someone who believes that he's selling, but he's really buying customers. We can talk about that sometime. But for now, we're talking about it on a more personal level. So on the personal level, what's happening is that I need to first decide, what am I? In this interaction, right, which we've spoken in the past when we talked about buy, sell, steal, we call it a transaction. But here we're going to talk about it in the interaction. Who am I? Am I the mashpia or am I the makabel? So here are 3 ways that you can figure out which one you are. All right? And again, I go to my notes because this can get confusing at times. All right. So the first question is, who am I? If you're the mashpia, there are 3 interesting things about you. Number 1, you could be mashpia on many mikablim simultaneously. One mashpia, one rebbe, one boss, one father, be mashpia on many mikablim simultaneously. Okay? The second one is that the mashpia, the zucher, the male, is makbid and gets upset if the makabel is makabel from a different mashpia. We know many stories from the Rebbes where the Rebbe had a kpaida because a chussid went elsewhere. Right? We all know Shem Yerachim, what would happen if our wife went someplace else while she was still our wife. How upset we would become if our children go to get what they should be getting from us from others. Right? We have a kpaida. The zucha has that kpaida. If the makabel goes to get what the zucha feels is part of this relationship from somewhere else. And the third is that the zucha, the mashpia, can be at least temporarily satisfied. While on the other hand, let's go over to the makabel. So the makabel is like this. The makabel can only receive from one mashpia at a time. All right? In today's world, some of these things become murky because Western culture has been working for so many years to inoculate us with the opposites of a lot of these things. But from a Torah perspective and from a Metzias perspective, right? A makabel could only be makabel from one mashpia at a time without it turning into a whole chon. That's not really kishman. Right? As far as I know, a woman can only get pregnant from one man at a time. Okay, that's in the physical realm. And it's the same thing in every other part of the relationship between the mashpia and the makabel. So the second thing is that the makabel is not bothered by the mashpia giving to others. Adirabba, the more the merrier. As long as my perceived portion is waiting for me, as the makabel. So if let's just use a simple example. If let's say I go up to my shviga every Erev Shabbos for the Tayameu, for Kigel, and if one Erev Shabbos I go up to my sister-in-law or to somebody else or to my sister, my shviga is going to have a tan on me. Hey, what happened? My Kigel's no good anymore. I have to go there for Kigel. Right? On the other hand, if I come in one Erev Shabbos and I see that my shviga is prepared Kigel for half a shtut, half the city she has Kigel for, I don't mind, unless my piece is not there for me. I go looking for my piece of kigel and there's no kigel. But if my piece is there, I'll do that. The more people that eat my shvigas kigel, the better my piece of kigel tastes, possibly. And here's something interesting is that the mekabel is never fully satisfied. So again, the mashpiya can be mashpiya on many, the mekabel can only receive from one at a time. And it's machlokes talk in the Gemara if a person should have one rebbe or multiple rebbes. The Gemara makes a difference. The Gemara I believe, between girsa and svura, right? I wonder if I noted it over here anywhere. No, I don't see it over here, but I remember there's such a Gemara. So now the question is, if I'm the mashpiya or I'm the mekabel, one of the ways I can tell is, does it bother me if this person is going to get this thing that we're interacting about from someone else? Because if it's going to bother me, then l'chayra I'm the mashpiya. If it doesn't bother me that this person is doing the same thing with many other people, then it's very possible I'm the mekabel. The second one is, we said, so you can receive from many. You're either bothered or not bothered by the person, right? By the person doing this interaction with others, and whether or not you can be satisfied. A father who's supporting his children in koil or in Yisrael or whatever he's supporting them, after a while he says, "Okay, can you give it?" But I don't recall. It could be there have been such stories, but I don't recall a story where a kid called up his father, or where someone who was getting money from the government or whatever from his boss should call him and say, "You know what? This week you don't have to give me. I had enough last week." Right? If you're giving out candies to the kinderlich, to the einiglich, or to the kids, or to whoever it is, at some point you run out. You say, "Okay, kids, no more tickelich, no more candies." But the kid who's getting the candies, he can have a room full of candies, and he still wants more candies. If there's a place to get them, he's coming to get it. Because that's the mekabel. The mekabel is never fully satisfied. Ad kedei kach, even a kli kibbel, a becha, as you pour in more and more, it's going to get rid of whatever it has to be able to keep on taking what it's got. Now, obviously, the way that the Rebbe Shalom created us is that as we get more, need more, get more, we grow. That's why we get fat. Right? That's how we gain weight, because we start out with a little bit, and then we get used to that, we need more, and then we get used to that, we need more, and that's that way with everything. As long as you're the mekabel, you will you'll build a whole new house. The kid is going to build a whole new house just for more candies if he needs room. Right? Because the mekabel is always interested in getting more, is never satisfied. All right? So those are the three ways that we can figure out what we are. Am I the mashpiya, am I the mekabel? Now here's what's interesting. At some point, as a mashpiya, you may ask yourself, well, what's in it for me? And we'll see in a second how that works, because the mashpiya's job is to fulfill the needs of the mekabel. That's just in the interaction. In order for it to be an interaction, that's what has to happen. Is that the mashpiya needs to be mashpiya something to the mekabel that the mekabel needs. Make sense? This means yes, this means no, this means I don't know. All right? So in order for this process to work properly, the Rebbe Shalom created what I refer to as, I said it earlier, I mentioned it, something called the pleasure exchange. And the pleasure exchange says as follows, that the mashpiya receives pleasure through the act of being mashpiya, from the act of giving pleasure. The mekabel be'etzem gives pleasure through the act of receiving, accepting that which the mashpiya is giving. And this is going to become interesting as we move forward into our next set, when we talk about that more in detail. But for now, we're just going to focus on the interaction. And the interaction says as follows. Between any mashpiya and mekabel, it doesn't make a difference who's the mashpiya and who's the mekabel, and we're going to reach Beit Olam. Before we're done, we're going to understand why we do or don't listen to the Torah. Right? Because we're not talking about the Irish, we're just going to talk about the Torah. And in this interaction, regardless of who is what, meaning regardless if it's the husband or the wife, whoever is being mashpiya, whoever is providing something to the other, versus whoever is receiving, the mashpiya gets the final word. The mashpiya gets to decide. Okay, this is where you can start writing down the rules. These are very simple rules. It's not complicated at all. Yet they become complicated in real time. because we mostly confuse who's the Mashpi'a, who's the Makabel. And we mostly confuse it by not wanting to decide which one we are. Because we could really choose, in any interaction, there's so much going on, you could basically choose who you want to be and you could follow through and it can work. Once you get good at practicing it in its simple form, in its true form. Okay? So the Mashpi'a gets the final word because the Metzias, that's just the way it has to be. The Mashpi'a could run out. The Mashpi'a could maybe not have what the Makabel is asking for. All right? So in the interaction, in order for it to work, the Mashpi'a gets to decide. The Mashpi'a gets to decide whether or not to feed the need, whether or not to provide the Makabel with what they're asking for, how to, when to, if to, that's all the Mashpi'a's decision. Okay? But now when I say it's Mashpi'a's decision, I'm saying this in order for the interaction to work properly, perfectly. So it's not that this is what the Mashpi'a needs. This is what the couple needs. This is what the interaction dictates. Okay? This is not just feeding. It happens to be that it feels good to the Mashpi'a to get the final word, right? We like to decide, we like to say who does what, when. But it's a necessity. It's not for the Mashpi'a's good feeling. It's a necessity for the interaction. Now, in order for that to happen, and I'm going to talk about two more steps that the Mashpi'a needs to take, but just that's the main idea. The main idea is that the Mashpi'a gets to make the final decisions. Yet in order for that to happen, the following needs to happen. The Makabel needs to initiate the interaction by notification of need. The Makabel has to come and say to the Mashpi'a, hey, I need this and this. Now, in order for this to work, the Makabel needs to give the final word to the Mashpi'a. State truly and clearly what they need. Very often we tell stories and it's not really what we're wanting or needing, and then we get upset at the other person when they don't understand what we're wanting and they're getting it wrong because we weren't clear about what we wanted, and we'll talk about some examples in a moment. And then give the final word. So the Makabel, in truth, although the Makabel doesn't have a job, yet in order for the Makabel to get what he or she wants, there's a formula that when it's followed is more or less a lock-in that you're either going to get what you want or you're going to get what you need. And I'll explain that in a second. So, the Makabel needs to initiate by giving the Mashpi'a the final word, and the format would be something along the lines of, it's up to you, you get to decide, and then clearly state their needs. Yet what I need from you is this, this, and this, or just this, and finish off with, but it's up to you. You get to decide. So if I'm going to borrow money from you, if I'm coming to ask you to make me supper, if I'm coming to find out, to ask you if you could please pick me up, take me off, we could go away for Shabbos, whatever it is that I want from you, I need to, let you know that you get to decide. That opens up your Mashpi'a, right? Puts you into your Mashpi'a mode, your Mashpi'a state. Secondly, I need to be clear about what I want, what I need, which most people are not. Many people are not. Most. Many people are not. We're so clear about what we don't want. I don't want to leave late, and I don't want to end up getting there. I don't want to, when you get there, I don't want you to disappear. What do you want? If you can say clearly what you do want, followed by, but it's up to you. This literally puts the Mashpi'a in a state of hashpua, and I'll show you in a moment an example of where it's so clear. Now, the job of the Mashpi'a at this point is, first of all, to stop whatever they're doing and to listen to what the Makabel is asking for. Right? First, just give them your presence, give them the least that you can give them is to at least listen to the request. And it doesn't make a difference if it's your child, if it's your spouse, if it's a worker, if it's your boss, if in the interaction, you're the Mashpi'a, they're the Makabel, you need to hear what they're saying. Now, assuming that you were all at this class and you all now know how to interact. So the Makabel who needs the thing, they go into the boss, they go to the parent, they go to the spouse, and they say, listen, it's up to you, step one. This and this and this is what I need, step two. But it's up to you, step three. This ignites within the Mashpi'a hashpo, the urge to give, the urge to share, the urge to be mashpiya. That's what opens it up. And now the mashpiya's job is to obviously listen, and then to prove to the makabel that he or she took the makabel's needs into consideration 100%. And the 100% is a very important factoid. Because the closer to 100% the mashpia gets in proving to the makabel that he or she understood the needs of the makabel, is going to be the difference in the interaction of how well the makabel will accept the decision. To the extent that the mashpia was able to prove to the makabel that he or she took the needs of the makabel into consideration 100%, the makabel will accept the decision and the choice even if it's not what they really asked for, even if it's not what they want. Yet to the extent that they feel that the mashpia took their needs into consideration less than 100%, is how much less they're going to accept the decision of the mashpia. And they'll argue with it, they'll resist the decision, they'll try again a different way. But if the mashpia could prove to the makabel that I took your needs into consideration 100%, and the way that we're going to do that is by listening, by validating, by paraphrasing, by saying back to them what they said to you. So we can either use paraphrasing or this technique we call echoing. We can talk about the differences in the future, but for now it's just basically say back to them what you heard them say to you until they say, yeah, that's what I mean. Because very often people don't say what they mean. In every human interaction, verbal interaction, there are at least 4 parts. There's what the person who said meant to say, and then there's what they actually said, which isn't always the same. Then there's what the person heard, and which is not the same as what the person said. And then there's the meaning that we attach to why the person said what they said, which is very often totally not anything, not what they meant to say, not what they said, and not what we heard. And that's something we could go deeper into if we need to. And definitely during a live mastermind or one-on-one. Yet for now, just so we understand that it's very important to be clear in your communication of what your need is. If you can't figure out your need, then how is the mashpia supposed to do that? So there are situations where we expect that. With the Rebbeinu Shalom we expect that, with our parents we expect that. Fortunately or unfortunately, in many couples, we expect that, even though it hasn't yet been earned. And that's something that also needs to be discussed a little bit deeper. But for now, let's stick to the formula, so that we can at least walk away today knowing that there's a formula that I can use at any time, in every one of my interactions. From Beit Olam to myself, to my spouse, to my boss, to buyers, to sellers, to anyone in my sviva. I can use this formula, I can use these tools in order to make my interactions better and my results better. So let's just quickly review, and then we'll do a couple of quick examples, and then we'll be done for today. And you'll be able to walk away today with knowledge and information that, when applied, will bring you results beyond your wildest dreams, in my humble opinion. I can't wait to hear back from you to let me know how this impacted your life in the future. Okay? So, the mashpia needs to take needs into consideration 100%. In order to do that, paraphrase to prove you understand the needs. And when we're done, regardless of how or when or what it worked out, the person did or didn't get what they asked for, you need to celebrate the fact that they accepted your decision. And that's an investment into the future. So that they'll want to accept your decisions in the future. It'll be easier for you to prove intent of taking their needs into consideration 100%. And it'll make it easier for them to accept future decisions. Okay? So that's what the rules of the male, according to Dr. Beck. The female, the makabel, needs to have his or her needs taken into consideration 100% in order for them to accept the decision of the mashpia. In order to get that, he or she needs to first give the final word, state clearly your needs, your true needs, and then give the final word when you're done. And here's just a quick example, right? Wife comes to husband. Now, by the way, before we get into the specific example, let's understand very importantly that let's assume for a second that you're a couple, and we're talking. And you've each heard, the husband and the wife have heard this concept. They know the rules, they know that the husband needs consideration 100%, he has to prove that he heard the needs, understood the needs, and he has to celebrate the acceptance of the decision when it's done. The wife understands, again, this is going both ways, right? Because sometimes he's the Mashpi'a, she's the Makabel, sometimes she's the Mashpi'a, he's the Makabel. So the wife, but we're just using husband and wife now, just for Mashpi'a Makabel. The wife knows that whenever she needs something, she has to initiate, she has to, by giving him the final word and say, listen, it's up to you, totally, you get to decide, stating clearly her needs, but it's up to you. All right? So that's the Mashpi'a and the Makabel, those are the rules, they're both ready to follow them 100%, except he comes in and he says to me, she doesn't give me the final word. So I ask him, are you proving to her that you're taking her needs into consideration 100%? How about if she comes in and she says, he's not taking my needs into consideration 100%? I ask her, are you giving him the final word? Because here's how this works. This is intuitive, this is instinctive. Right? Just like when you get a knock over here and this, whichever spot it is on your elbow, and your hand goes out, you get one on your knee and boops. What's that called? Right? When you get like a knock in a certain place. Help me out here, fellas. What's that called? When you get like a knock from the doctor with that rubber thing, just to test your reflexes, right? It goes to test your reflex. So this is reflexive. This is mamish natural. If a person comes to you and says to you, it's up to you, you got the final word, to the extent that you believe that they're giving you the final word, you're going to take their needs into consideration. That's how natural it works. Yet we're afraid, if I'm going to give you the final word, you're not going to take my needs into consideration, and then I'm going to be a fool. But if you do this, this works. Now obviously there's a difference between a relationship that's at zero, and these things are going to work naturally, or a relationship that's already in the plus side, they've already invested and done other things, or they're doing this naturally without realizing, and they're just going to hone it, to a relationship that's what we refer to as below zero, and needs to first come up to zero in order for this to work. If there are issues, if there are underlying issues that are not being dealt with or not being addressed, it's very easy that this is not going to work, definitely not immediately. Although, if we begin to follow this as a rule, and we can somehow get on the same page, this could be a game changer. All right? But that's for one-on-one discussion. That's not for here to suddenly try to fix something that's broken. This is to enhance something that's good, or to make something that's okay even better. Which is just two ways of saying the same thing. Okay? So here we go. The wife comes to the husband. Oh, so we said that if the husband says, just going to do a quick recap. The husband says she's not giving me final word. We ask him, are you taking her needs into consideration 100%? Are you proving to her that you're taking her needs into consideration 100%? If she comes, she says he's not taking my needs into consideration 100%, we ask her, are you giving him the final word? And are you being clear about your needs? Because sometimes, and this is just a simple example, the wife comes to the husband, up to you, right? She watched this and she knows this and she studied it and she reviewed it and she's practicing it. Maybe she did a little one-on-one work. Maybe she joined the group, the ladies group, which we have currently going on Tuesday nights at 9:30 on Zoom. And she says, up to you, my husband, but I would really like to go to my parents for Shabbos. But up to you. So far she did so good, right? Now it's his job to be able to prove to her that he's taking her needs into consideration 100%. In order to do that, he has to be, at least momentarily, a detective. And he'd say, oh, sounds like you want to go to your parents for Shabbos. What's happening by your parents? This Shabbos is different than any other Shabbos. Now, if she says to him, well, I heard my sisters are going to be there for Shabbos and I wanted to spend time with them, etc., and that's not really what she means. And she's going to give him the final word again. And he's going to say, oh, so it sounds to me like the reason you want to go is because you want to meet with your sisters, you want to spend time with your sisters. I'm just thinking that with all the expenses involved and all we're going to have to sleep in that little room in the back and it's smelly and it's whatever and it's not exactly geschmack for everybody, we have anyway a Shabbos Sheva in a few weeks from now where we're going to be spending time with your family, with your sisters. How about we just do it then? And then she'll get upset. You don't understand me, you're not listening to what I'm saying. You're not taking my needs. Why? Because she didn't say the truth. The real reason why she wants to go away for Shabbos is because she doesn't want to cook, or she doesn't want to have to clean, or because of some other reason that she has why this week is a good week for her to want to go there. Because if she would have told him the truth, and he in fact addressed her need, she wouldn't have a problem. Because as long as she feels that he's taking her needs into consideration 100%, she'll be fine with it. She'll love the yes, but she'll be okay with the no. And then he gets to celebrate. Okay? So, his job is to realize that if she's not accepting his decision, it's very often more about the fact that she doesn't feel understood and validated than the fact that he said no to what she asked for. And it's that way with all of us. We're just using, again, husband and wife because משפיע ומקבל, that's just how our brains are wired initially. But we have to really work on this because sometimes the husband's משפיע, she's the מקבל, sometimes she's the משפיע, he's the מקבל. Right? When it comes to cooking, when it comes to laundry, if he wants something specific for supper, he has to come and say, listen, it's up to you. I'd like to have fish, steak, chicken, kale, I don't know, whatever it is for supper, but it's up to you. Whatever you want to make, you make. And he will accept that as long as she shows him that she took his needs into consideration 100%. Imagine, he comes to her in the morning, he says, listen, it's up to you, whatever you want, but I'd love to have steak tonight. But it's up to you. And he goes to work, and he comes home at night, and he comes into supper, and there's chicken. Now, just think of the scenario, simple scenario. Imagine if she says to him, yeah, well, I thought about it, and I decided, who cares about what you want? I was in the mood of making chicken. As the plates fly, right? Not that I'm suggesting that that's what should happen. Yet now think about it the other way. Imagine if he comes home and he says, oh, didn't we discuss steak? And she shows him that she took his needs into consideration 100%. And she says, you know, I thought I had a steak in the freezer. And I knew that I have a whole day, I have to take it out a little before you come home, and I put on something, whatever it is, and to make it for you, it's the easiest thing in the world. By the time I realized that it's fish wrapped up in a silver foil, it was too late already to go get you a piece of steak. So I took out whatever I had, which was chicken. She showed him that she took his needs into consideration, 100%. Any plates flying? No plates flying. Hopefully ever, but definitely not now. Okay? So now the question is, let's take this a step further. What's this? All this thing about taking the final word or giving the final word? So here's an easy one. Here's a real easy one. A little baby is born. And the baby is born full of needs. And the parents are here to provide those needs. And in the middle of the night, during the first months of the baby's life, the baby wakes up in the middle of the night crying. What do the parents do? Everything! Whatever it takes. We're going to shuckle, we're going to shake, we're going to rattle, we're going to change pampers, we're going to feed, we're going to take it inside and outside and open the windows and dress it and undress it and walk up and down the street with a carriage just to hopefully it's going to stop crying and it's going to go to sleep. The baby's going to fall asleep, right? That's what good parents do. That's what healthy parents do. That's hopefully what all parents do. And yet, a very short while after that, the child learns how to come out of the crib. And the parents, for safety purposes mostly, but also for a good night's rest, say, Yankee, don't come out of the crib unless you tell Tati and Mommy come to the crib. We'll take you out. Now, a few months ago, when Yankee needed, we didn't even know what he needed. We were up all night, no matter how tired we were, no matter how hard we had to work the day before, the day after, and we did everything we can to take Yankee's needs into consideration. And now, all of a sudden, Yankee shows up in the middle of the night, and he knocks on Tati. He says, hello, Tati. I want a drink. What does Tati say? What's Tati's initial reaction? Well, I don't know in your house, but I can imagine if the initial reaction would be, go quickly right back into your crib and I'm going to bring you a drink. What just happened? Way back when, Tati would do anything to figure out what the kid needs. Take the kid's needs into consideration 1,000,000%. What happened? The child took some of the decision into his own hands and immediately, instinctively, internally, without even thinking about it, the more the child begins to take decision, final word into his own hands, is the extent that the responsibility, that sense of responsibility, just goes down. That sense of responsibility that I am now fully invested, I have to take 100% of your needs into consideration, drops. with you taking. Now this is a progression, this is a healthy progression, and it's going to be happening throughout life. Yet this is just one place where we see clearly that by the Mekabel taking any type of decision into their own hands, by not fully relying on the Mashpi'a, the responsibility, the sense of responsibility of the Mashpi'a to the needs of the Mekabel goes down. And that's why it's so important for the Mekabel to give a sense of finality, of you decide, of what we call final word to the Mashpi'a, in order to ignite and encourage the Mashpi'a to take our needs into consideration, the Mekabel's needs into consideration in their decision. Okay? Just another couple of minutes and I'm going to wrap this up because this is just a lot of information, and even I myself am feeling a little bit overwhelmed from so much of it in one shot. But let's just quickly touch upon something called the needy male. And that's, well, again, I don't mean this chashvon personally to anybody, but that's what we refer to as shvigas. The needy male is someone who makes believe that they're taking your needs into consideration, except it's very clear to everybody that they're only taking their own needs into consideration. That's the needy male. There's the ultimate male, which is what, I guess, in the beginning when a young couple gets married, and so when he brings her the panusa and where he gives her what he has to give her, so he's the mashpia, she's the mekabel, and when she cooks for him, does his laundry, etc., she's the mashpia, he's the mekabel. Yet at some point we all understand that the person of the level of, let's say, Avodas Hashem, of Rebbe Yashiv Zatzal, at some point his Rebbetzin, when she did things for him, it was a bechina of what the Gemara condition says, that a person could be, even though usually a person has to be mekabdish isha by giving her something, but if he's a udam chushiv, then she could give him something, and almanas, that he's accepting the gift from her, that's for her such a big schis that therefore the condition works. It's as if he gave her something. So there's something called the ultimate male, and that is l'mushal by us chassidim. Let's say when someone puts a fish on the Rebbe's tish, so it's not considered that he gave something to the Rebbe. He got the schis of giving the Rebbe the fish. So there's such a thing as an ultimate male, and that's where someone is so purely focused on the needs of others, constantly taking the needs of others into consideration, where it just becomes an act of giving to that person still stays an act of receiving the gift of being able to give. And whoever paid attention to last week's Rutz and Lekabel, and we spoke about stage 4, can use this information to apply there, and together they will both make so much more sense than they do separately or apart. Okay? Just a quick question before we sign off, since it's Erev Rosh Hashanah, and we're about to go to Slichas. And that is to ask ourselves, based on the model that we just discussed, why do we sometimes not listen to the Torah? Why do we sometimes do things differently than the Torah dictates? If we were to understand and realize at any given moment that the Rebbeinu Shalom is the ultimate mashpia, and our role is to become the ultimate mekabel, which is also something that we talk about when we talk about ask, earn, and appreciate. I believe we did that set, but if not, we can do it again moving forward and discuss it having understood these concepts. Is that the only reason that I would consider not following the tenets of the Torah is if I feel that the Torah didn't take my needs into consideration 100%. If I understand that the Torah took all of my needs into consideration 100% in everything that it's telling me to do or not to do, I have zero problem following that 100%. The only reason I would do it differently is when I feel like, the Torah didn't take my needs into consideration 100%, and that's therefore why I feel that I need to take some control back, and I need to have the final word. And yet, based on what we discussed and what we spoke about, the only way for me to feel that the Torah took all of my needs into consideration 100% is by giving the Torah, and therefore the Rebbeinu Shalom, the final word. And that's the only way to realize that the Torah did in fact take all of our needs into consideration. 100%. And as we move closer to Rosh Hashanah, and Mi'etz Hashem, we will do a quick recap next week of some of the things we spoke about these past few weeks in a way that will be helpful for all of us to prepare for this new year that's coming in ways that we may or may not have been able to in the past. By following our desire to grow, by learning whatever knowledge is necessary in order for us to know how to, and consistently practicing and applying everything that we learn into our daily lives as new habits, as new hergailim, so that we can also one day say, Raglai Melichas Osi. Thank you for listening. If there's any questions, we'll stick around for another few minutes before we go. Even if I disappear, sound and video in just a second, we'll still be here following the questions on the panels. And if there's anything that we can answer either publicly or privately, we will. Thanks for listening. See you next week.